Good morning and namaste, everyone. My name is Atul, and I will be covering some of the philosophical parts of Ayurveda. Um, and we're going to start with a short presentation on the philosophical perspective on Ayurveda and disease. So, without further ado, let's begin. So, some of the objectives here, we want to compare Ayurveda and Western medicine. You know, what are some of the differences? What are some of the differentiators between Ayurveda and Western medicine? And in particular, there are some very fundamental conceptual differences. What's the concept of karma? What is the concept of kshetra? Kshetra means literally the field of activities. Kshetra can mean a field, like a field where you might plow rows and plant seeds and water seeds and plants grow and plants are harvested. So what is the concept of kshetra in the context of Ayurveda? What are the threefold miseries? You will often hear these referred to in Ayurvedic texts. So we'll talk about those. What are they? The concept of krimi. Krimi literally can mean parasites. It can mean worms. It can mean insects. But specifically, parasitic issues are one of the subgroups of types of disease that Ayurveda deals with. And, how we deal with krimi is a subject in herbology and Ayurveda. And finally, what is Ayurvedic Chikitsa? What are the treatments that we use in Ayurveda? So what is it that Ayurveda aims to balance? What's the goal of what we're trying to do? So Ayurveda is looking at all of these things. It's looking at the physical body. Okay, I mean the physical body. Obviously, this is the it's very important to us. We need our physical bodies, and they need to be working. They need to be balanced. That's a no-brainer. The mind. Now, the mind is very important. Our state of mind has a lot to do with our state of physical health. This is increasingly becoming an important topic in Western medical practice as well. As you go to your family doctor and they'll ask, well, how are you feeling? Are you experiencing stress? Of course, part of this is driven by the drug companies looking for new outlets for people to prescribe, anxiety or antidepressant medications, where they make a lot of money. But the fact is that our state of mind, are we happy, are we stressed, has a lot to do with our health. This is part of the definition of health according to Ayurveda. Sharirendriya sattvatma samyogo dhari jivatam nityaga janubhandascha pariyayar ayuruchyate. Consciousness. What is consciousness? Consciousness, when we talk about consciousness, we're talking about we're talking about the collective awareness. What is our state of mind, our combination of mind, intelligence, and ego? In Ayurveda, we also consider what is the soul, what is the Atma, what is that which underlies everything. And we will talk about that also. Karma, what are our activities? We are affected by our activities. Our activities in this life affect us. One big issue that people have only become aware of widely in the last 10 or 15 years is that many veterans come back from conflict situations, from wars, and they suffer from PTSD, and to such an extent that they find it very hard to fit in. And many of them will end up on the street because they just can't hold down a job. They can't function in a way that we consider normal in our society, and that is very sad. But karma affects what happens, what we do and how we view things in this life is also affected by things that we've done in previous lives. This is something that is uniquely the perspective in Ayurveda as part of the ancient philosophical systems coming from India. Ayurveda also takes into account what are our beliefs, what are our values, what's our diet, what's our lifestyle, what are our likes and dislikes. These are all very important things. As Ayurvedic practitioners, we have to be aware of these things. If someone is very much identifying with their physical existence, their approach to health is going to be very different, and they may not be as much affected by, being able to adjust their perspective on things. If someone's perspective is 100% physical and they believe that their physical existence is everything, it's a very different ball game. And the Western medicine approach really is more focused on when people are more focused on the body. And Western medicine says, okay, look, there's a problem with the body. We're going to treat it like a machine. There's something that's not working right. We've figured out the right screw to turn. Here's a drug. It's a molecule that's been designed in a laboratory. It's like a screwdriver that's going to turn a particular screw adjustment and change the way that this very complex machine, your body, works. Now, we think we really have a pretty good understanding, even if we don't completely understand, particularly in the area of neurosciences, but we've done a lot of tests, and we verified that it doesn't kill anybody except in some extreme circumstances. You watch those commercials on TV saying, look, we've got this new medication for treating this, and side effects may include death, dizziness, vomiting, and you may suffer mental illness. And that's because they have to disclaim that they can say that this is pretty much, we can guarantee that it mostly should work, but really we do not fully understand this. So there's a difference between the holistic approach and the allopathic approach. So in Ayurveda, we are taking a more considerate approach of what the person's life is. Their life means, what are their beliefs? What are their values? And in particular, we will look at diet as a very important component of health. It's not just the quantities. Only now, modern medicine is starting to look at diet. It's starting to look at nutrition, not in terms of the quantities. So there were some tests that were developed back in the 1950s where they took a analysis of food in something called a bomb spectrometer, where they would basically burn it, and they would measure the spectrum of radiation that was emitted by the food, and then they would feed it to people, and then they would do the same thing on the stool that they passed out, and they would compare those two, and they would come up with some basic ideas. I'm sorry, it's called a bomb calorimeter. That's right. Anyway, that is still basically the way that the measurement of calories on things is done. It's a scientific method, it's a scientific approach, but it does not take into account how efficiently my digestion works versus your digestion versus my digestion in the summer versus my digestion in the winter. These are all things that we take into account in Ayurveda. So it's not just what you are having and what are the calories. Sometimes people say, oh, you cook with ghee? Oh my God, that's so many calories. But this is really, it's a bit of a myth, because the way that you absorb things into your body has a lot to do with how you're absorbing it. Ayurveda also asks the question, who am I treating? It's focused on the whole person. We want to get, we actually want to take a philosophical perspective to understand the who. Who am I? Am I this body? Am I the mind? Am I some spiritual spark of existence that is underlying all these things and that is trying to express itself through all these? Ayurveda is non-invasive. We will make changes. We will make some, some herbal changes, some things like massage therapy, and one of the really important things is dietary changes. It is non-invasive. They are the types of things that someone might normally do. They're not trying to go and turn screws. We're not treating the body as a machine. We're treating you as a person, and your existence is a whole system. And we want to help that whole system to be in balance. We also look at preventative measures and what are pre-symptoms. There are pre-symptoms of things as well. And, Western medicine doesn't really give much consideration unless there are things like, okay, we can use blood and stool as an indication of the possible early stages of colon cancer, for example, looking for colorectal neoplasms. So conventional medicine, Western medicine is treating the body. There's an increasing awareness of mind. What's the specific disease that I'm treating? And it's focused on the bacteria, the virus, the cell condition of the person. What is the specific disorder? Okay? It's very specific. And it can provide excellent treatment after the disease is discovered and excellent treatment for emergencies and traumas. It is very, very specific. It is just in the generalities, sometimes there are problems and not taking these things into account. And the screw turning approach let's tweak the metabolism, let's change the way that the body is working at a very low level. This has led to a lot of very, very well-documented catastrophes, such as thalidomide. Thalidomide was a drug that was given for morning sickness that produced horrendous birth defects, and it was discovered back in the 60s, and obviously doctors stopped using it. But that's considered kind of a textbook case of why it's very important to test drugs very thoroughly. So let's talk about Ayurveda. The living being exists on multiple levels. And this is a very important concept. What are these dimensions? There's the physical body. This is the outermost dimension, the physical body, or sthula sharira. There's the energetic body, the sukshma sharira, you can say the refined body, and that consists of three primary components: the mind, the manas, the intellect or buddhi, and the soul or atman, which is wrapped by a layer of ahankar or ego. Okay. What is the concept of kshetra? So this concept of being on multiple levels, this is very important. Okay, can't see the whole slide. I'm going to try to scale this down just a little bit. Bear with me just a moment. I'm just trying to make the slide display a little bit easier to view for everyone. Okay. Okay. So we talked about these layers of existence and how the how we're existing simultaneously on multiple layers, going from the outside to the inside. This is very important, and this is a recurring concept that we'll talk about many times in discussing Ayurvedic concepts. The concept of kshetra, or field, is important. Now, one of the authoritative texts in yoga philosophy is Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And in the 13th chapter, Sri Krishna says in the Gita that the five great elements, or the Pancha Mahabhutas, the ego or ahankar, the intelligence, prakriti, the 11 senses, the five sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, misery, the body, knowledge, and patience, comprise the field of action for the living being, or kshetra, along with its various transformations. Kshetra literally means a field. It's a place where you plant seeds, seeds grow, seeds produce some fruits, and you receive those fruits. So all of these things together are considered the field. Why is this relevant to Ayurveda? Because the living being that we're treating is someone who exists on multiple levels, on multiple dimensions, and the field of action is what has so much to do with the different bitter and sweet results that we get from life. So this is really putting things in perspective, and it's a very important basic understanding. It's something that I think it would be a very good forum discussion to go into more detail on. But, that's the basic idea of kshetra. So why does the living being receive disease or imbalance? This is a question. Let's try to answer that question. First of all, what is karma? So karma means reaction from our past actions. The underlying theory of Ayurveda is that our miseries occur as a result of actions on a stage that always is changing. It changes based on our own actions, or our karma. And the important part is that we are undergoing a cycle of repeated birth and death. That cycle is driven by our own activities. So there's a hand of fate, but that part of fate is a result of our own past activities, which we simply don't see. Why is someone born with a silver spoon in their mouth and someone else is born in misery? It is because of past activities. We are meant to learn from our past activities. You can think of karma as a bank balance. Sometimes you have a lot of money in the bank, and a person has money and they go and spend it on bad things. They spend it on drugs and weapons and, getting harm done to others. Ultimately, they're going to pay the price for that. It's all going to come back to them at some point. Someone else that may have a balance and they use it for very good deeds, for charity and so forth, and good results will come to them. Maybe not immediately, but later. Someone else may overspend and they get their line of credit canceled out. So this is an example of how we have our balance of debts from previous lives, our negative balances, and we also have our positive balances, and we make choices how we're going to use our balance and how we will use our ability to act. Now, there are two types of karmic actions. There are actions that result from the influence of the three gunas. We're going to talk a little bit more about the three gunas later, sattva, rajas, and tamas. These actions that are caused by the influence of the three gunas, they're not necessarily under our control. And actions themselves are not directly the cause of the results of action. So sometimes we make choices and they lead to other things, and we don't necessarily have control over them. We're not necessarily conscious of them. Okay? What are the threefold miseries? So there are three types of miseries, and you will find these referred to frequently in Ayurveda. Adhyatmika, miseries which arise from the mind and body. This includes disease, mental disturbance, emotional pain, and grief. Adibhautic. Adibhautic are miseries caused by other living entities, being bitten by a dog or a snake, being afflicted by worms or insects, suffering caused by war, conflict, and suffering caused by the envious or hateful actions of others. Um, in some places, people will just make comments, and they'll make hurtful comments just because they can, and that is it can be very hurtful. If people are always, complete strangers will come up to us and say, "Hey, I think you're fat," or "You should lose weight." And whether they try to do it in a way to, feel good about themselves by trying to give quote unquote helpful advice or not, it's hurtful. And this is adibhautic suffering. This is one of these three big bucket categories of suffering. And adidaivic. Adidaivic is suffering which is caused by the seasons, caused by environmental extremes, caused by natural disasters such as floods, tsunamis. It may be caused by snow, extreme cold, extreme rains, extreme heat. So these are the three general categories of miseries that we undergo in this world. Well, now there's a concept in Western medicine of viruses versus bacteria. Viruses are in a unique category. They don't strictly fit the definition of living beings. They are just snippets of RNA. They require a living host to replicate themselves. We can say that viri are adhyatmic sufferings because they're a type of disturbance caused by an agent that changes the function of the body at a cellular level. There's even some viruses that can cause genetic damage, and that especially the autoimmune, more complex viruses such as the autoimmune disorders, they can cause fundamental changes. And industrial societies also expose us to teratogenic, carcinogenic, mutagenic compounds, and these are really poisons. They are produced by the actions of others. So we can say this is adibhautic suffering. Like, if somebody's coming and putting poison in your water, that's the action of another. And, it's just the big corporations who were doing this and still do it when they can, unless they get caught. And then they get hit with a fine and don't usually go to jail. But these poisons, they can change the function of the body in ways that create dysfunction, disease, and death. One of the ancient texts, Madhavanadan, mentions bacterial infections as well. So there is definitely ancient knowledge of such things in Ayurveda. Now there is also Kriminadan. So there are diseases which are due to krimi or pathogens. So we're referring to krimi in a generic term as pathogens, not just as parasites. And then there are two types of pathogens mentioned. There's external and internal. So external may come from dirt, from kapha or mucus, or the compound kapha of the body, from blood or rakta, from feces. And there are 24 of these. We're not going to go into these. There are 7 types of visarpa, or bacterial infections, mentioned. And so krimi is a very broad concept. It includes fungal infections, viral infections, bacterial infections, parasites, or even bug bites. And of course, some bug bites can also carry parasites, such as one very well-known one is malaria. It's a parasite that's carried by mosquitoes and transmitted by mosquito bites. So chikitsa can be given by cause. This is another very important thing. So Ayurveda looks at the treatments, and we also look at the karmic origins of problems. We may look at Jyotish to understand the types of issues of fate, and these will be things that tell us about, things from previous lives. We may look at the Jyotish or Vedic astrology to understand remedies that may involve what is our connection with universal existence to gain relief. We want to remove the causative factor or hetu. Um, and this is sometimes also intertwined with diet. We often sometimes find that people are undergoing a problem, and in Western societies, I don't know how many times we have people come to us and, they have a problem and we say, well, what do you eat? Well, I have red meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We don't have to think really hard about that. We really need to change you to a more plant-based diet. Um, and sometimes people just come back and they say, "Wow, that was like miraculous, amazing," you know. So that's a good start. That's sort of a fundamental thing. It's also the hetu. It's the causative factor because there's a karmic issue as well with having such a heavily a diet that is heavily based on the suffering of other beings. That is simply, a karmic common sense fact. Ayurveda focuses on causal remedies, and these are usually benign. Someone might normally make these kind of choices on their own, like diet changes or lifestyle changes. These are not invasive and really difficult things. There are things like mantra, meditation practices, yoga practices, and pranayam. These can all be used for mental and spiritual balance. Ahara or diet that pacifies the doshas, dhatus, and agni, and a general vihar, which is the daily routine and seasonal routine, may also be suggested for maintenance of health. Herbal formulas and panchakarma therapies are also employed. Herbal treatments are almost all benign and they have a limited effect on natural body processes. There are some herbal treatments that are banned because of the side effects of overconsumption. The FDA approval process assumes that as soon as somebody comes out and says, hey, there's this herb called bala and it can help you with losing weight, people will go out and buy 1 kilo of bala. And if having, 10,000 times the normal dose could have a harmful effect, the FDA will consider that we should not allow that, especially if it can cause some very bad condition like cancer or something. But herbal treatments in Ayurveda are almost all very benign, and it takes longer. So that's it. We have that's the allotted time for this first section. If there are no questions, I'm going to hand this over to Leah. And I thank you very much.